Club members, let's get something 100% straight. I am not advocating for Tyreek Hill. I did a podcast a week ago in which I pointed out that Tyreek Hill is at best a jerk and probably more accurately a scumbag. I pointed out that Tyreek Hill has at least 10 or 12 kids. I happen to believe that it is exceedingly difficult to be a good parent if you don't know how many children you have. My point in advocating on behalf of Tyreek Hill is because Tyreek Hill, even if he is a scumbag, Tyreek Hill's constitutional rights directly impact your constitutional rights. Tyreek Hill's constitutional rights directly impact your kids' constitutional rights, your grandkids' constitutional rights, and Tyreek Hill's constitutional rights directly impact my constitutional rights. Tyreek Hill is a piece of shit in many, many ways. However, his constitutional rights, if the police can show up and take Tyreek Hill's constitutional rights, they can show up and take your constitutional rights, my constitutional rights. We have to do something about that. I talk in this podcast all the time about being multicultural places us in a position of responsibility. I talk all the time about the African American community having, in my opinion, basically ceded its constitutional rights to groups of other people. Black people don't fight for themselves anymore. At least there are no, I shouldn't say that. African Americans at the grassroots level are still committed, still believing that they can effectuate change, but you can't do that if you can't find a single black lawyer to go on the news and advocate on behalf of Tyreek Hill. So we as multicultural people have to do it, not for Tyreek Hill, but for us. For us. I say on this podcast all the time, we as multicultural club members, we as whether you are your grandchildren are multicultural, whether you are your son, your daughters are multicultural, whether you're like me and you're born multicultural, we have to protect ourselves. And you start protecting yourselves by identifying the threats. When the police / the government pulls someone over and yanks them out of their car, that issue, without probable cause to believe a crime has occurred, that is a violation of the Constitution. Here's how the Constitution works. Here's how constitutional rights work. If we allow one person's constitutional rights to be taken, that impingement on those rights impinges on our rights. It's like being pregnant. You can't be kind of pregnant. I don't know if that's a good analogy, but it's exactly correct. You have to stand up for everyone's constitutional rights. Therefore, a piece of crap like Tyreek Hill, he's not a nice person. He's not a kind person. He doesn't appear to have done anything meaningful, but his rights directly relate to my rights and to your rights. And so when I'm pointing out that we need to defend Tyreek Hill, we do. I wanted to do a podcast because I don't know if you guys saw this, but the Miami Herald, I think it's the name of the paper, just came out with a piece on Sunday and pointed out, oh, by the way, the cop who pulled Tyreek Hill out of the car, threw him on the ground, handcuffed him, had been violating people's constitutional rights, not for weeks or months, but for years. 4 years. I told you, this behavior is a threat to all of us. Think about Tyreek Hill, think about your kid. Think about your nephew. Think about your grandkid. This cop who doesn't follow the rules has not followed the rules, and he is the threat. It's not for Tyreek Hill. It's this cop and this department that has allowed people like this to continue to violate not Tyreek Hill's constitutional rights, but our constitutional rights, or at least lay the foundation for violating our constitutional rights. Let's look at this. Miami-Dade police officer at the center of the Tyreek Hill traffic stop has been suspended several times, police records show. You go on down in this article, and this is disturbing. The Miami-Dade police officer placed on administrative duties after the controversial traffic stop of Miami Dolphins star Tyreek Hill has been suspended multiple times. Officer Danny Torres was placed on suspension at least six times during his 27-year career, according to his employee profile. The profile included information showing a 20-day suspension in 2018 and another incident in 2019, 2020, and 2022. This guy, this cop, who so many of you are rushing to defend, he's been doing this not for weeks, but for decades. For decades. Tyreek Hill is I don't know what Tyreek Hill. I personally disagree with everything about Tyreek Hill and how he exists. I do not have expectations of Tyreek Hill. But it's as Nick Wright said on What's Right with Nick Wright, and we did an episode on that, Tyreek Hill doesn't have the constitutional obligation to not violate the law. The cop does. And now, lo and behold, it turns out, guess what? He's been doing this for over a decade, violating people's constitutional rights for a decade. And this is my point about what we as multicultural people have to do. We as the multicultural community have to do is we've got to defend the rights of African Americans like Tyreek Hill, because Tyreek Hill directly, or the denial of Tyreek Hill's constitutional rights directly undermine our constitutional rights. I've pointed out, not one African American attorney, not one African American agent has stepped to the plate and responsibly and competently pointed out what we've been pointing out. In our comments, there's 20 of you guys have directly hit the nail right on the head. You can't do what they did. You directly hit the nail right on the head and said, yeah, they pulled him over for allegedly driving without a seatbelt. And one of you, we were just texting today or messaging today, pointed out you can't even see into the car. The multicultural community, us, me and you, us, all of us, we have to point that out, not for Tyreek Hill. We have to point that out for us as Americans. This is our country. We have to protect it. And I messed up again, by the way. I was supposed to say like and subscribe. We are killing it. But like and subscribe. It's important. We're going to take this. This is a movement we're on. And the more people we talk to, the better. So like and subscribe. Please, please, please. But also remember this. I'm going to tell you the truth on this podcast. And the truth is that Tyreek Hill isn't important to me individually, probably not important to you individually, but whether or not he has extended his constitutional rights directly impacts me, and it directly impacts you, and it directly impacts our community. Us. Let's care about us. Thank you. I'm having a great time. I will talk to you soon. Got a new podcast coming out on Mark Zuckerberg.